Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance's Crypto Roundup for Friday, December 5th, 2025. We're back after a little bit of a Thanksgiving break here with my dear friends David Brill and Joshua Ashley Clayman. Before we begin our usual disclaimers, obviously, everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn Live and YouTube and X. Please keep in mind nothing discussed is business or investment advice or legal advice, and certainly what we're discussing really are our own personal opinions, not necessarily the opinions of our respective organizations. David, Josh, it is good to be back. Lots going on. David in Miami, I think I might have mentioned this to you earlier. Josh, you know this. We both live in the state of New Jersey, 22 degrees when I woke up this morning, David. Pretty damn chilly. David, Josh, there's a lot going on, a lot to catch up on as well. David, I'm just going to kick it off. Let's talk markets, buddy. If it's one more text message you and I share about the roller coaster, we can't hold 89. We can barely hold 88. What's going on?
I don't know. Maybe it's getting too cold for a Santa rally based on the temperature in New Jersey. It's such a weird market. On the one hand, again, like we have such positive news. I'm sure Josh is going to talk about some of the progress that's being made down in Washington, and I can talk about that too. It just feels like the market wants to go lower. Yeah. And, I really thought that maybe Vanguard allowing their customers to buy the crypto ETFs would be the bottom. But it just feels like it wants to go lower. But we do have some positive economic data, and maybe we'll see another rate cut. So hopefully that's good for risk assets. So a lot of positivity around our industry, but our market itself just seems to want to go down.
David, to that point, if I could, and Josh would love your opinion on this, because obviously, David, you and I and Josh look at not just the crypto markets, although that's kind of the full time for us. David, I was looking at some of the news this morning on the equities market, for example, and we had seen some downward pressure on some things for a while. But the underlying economic data for it is pretty good. Some of the economists are predicting a pretty strong economy and earnings to substantiate, equities prices. I know it's a different dynamic for the crypto space, but I've yet to see the catalyst. I agree with you. Vanguard should have been bigger news than I think it was. I think Charles Schwab announced similarly. B of A announced crypto should be, I think it was 4% of a portfolio allocation. I'm trying to figure out, David, Josh, what's left?
What's left, Josh? What haven't we hit yet?
The Joshua Clayman family office is clearly the missing piece of the puzzle, David.
Well, I do wonder, guys. I know this isn't exactly on the exact topic that we're tracing, but it is something that there was a lot of buzz about just in the past 24 hours. In fact, Adele, our friend and colleague from the WSBA, had brought it up to me yesterday. I'm saying that she was hearing a lot, and that is how can I best describe it? The letter from a certain powerful fund, essentially asking that DeFi trading protocols be treated as exchanges in the context of tokenized U.S. equities and DeFi trading protocols.
Yep.
So I wonder whether that could be having an effect on just countervailing forces. Because I think there's been a pretty big reaction to that from the industry, including, I won't say anything further about that. I will say, just for the benefit of those in the audience, it is in fact quite cold in New Jersey, and my heat is being repaired as we speak, which is why I'm bundled up like this. So.
No, Josh, it's a good point. It makes me think of something else as well. We haven't spoken about it in a little bit, David, Josh, but stable coins are increasingly an important part of the ecosystem in great measure. And we saw not too long ago, David, particularly powerful banking lobbies pushing back on stable coins. Is that part of the narrative that Josh is talking about, where it might be potentially good risk on news in the aggregate, but you get these little kind of pinpricks of things that might blow up the balloon. David, is that kind of overemphasizing some of these things?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
So, look, we know that there is this struggle now between whether customers can get yield from stablecoins or not.
Yeah.
Either way, it doesn't affect their use case. It makes their use case more attractive to some individuals. And my view is that I do think individuals should benefit from the yield or the rewards, but I do think that some of the providers of those stable coins are coming up with unique solutions to be able to share some of those rewards with their customers. And we all know the USDC relationship with Coinbase as one example. Not totally surprised Citadel is pushing back on the DeFi. I mean, look, it's their prerogative, and they have a view. I think the crypto world has a different view, but it's the benefit of our process is that different companies get to express their opinions in the rule-making process. So I don't think that came totally as a surprise, but obviously the DeFi world had a strong reaction.
David, to that point though, and Josh, I'm really glad you raised this because I feel like we're talking about two different segments of the ecosystem, and I'm not minimizing DeFi. We focus on DeFi a lot, but Josh, to that point, I feel like the UX for DeFi in the broader ecosystem, for the public especially, is just not there. So I feel like we're talking about broad crypto, we're talking about stable coins and kind of the stuff that's going on there. I feel like DeFi is almost not an afterthought, certainly, but something that will have to be addressed later on. Josh, do you agree with that?
So I generally agree. I wasn't necessarily suggesting that like the effect on DeFi could be making moves in the price per se, but just that headlines. Although maybe I'll say what I was thinking, but then it sounds like perhaps we're past that point, right? Which is that as we have positive headlines, then if we have controversial headlines or other sort of headlines that make people think, and they're not thinking, oh, this is just quote just DeFi, but thinking like, okay, effect on broader crypto market pricing. But in your view, guys, like, because I defer to you on all things investment, and even though it's not investment advice, but markets. I mean, do you think we're past the point where, say, an announcement about the Citadel letter, right, is not going to have, or where it's no longer going to really materially affect the price, say, of Bitcoin?
I mean,
just the announcement itself.
I get where you're going with that, Josh, and David, you tell me if you disagree. When I had seen the announcement of the letter about DeFi, if I had seen that letter 2 or 3 years ago, I think it would have had a much greater impact negatively on the crypto space. I mean, David, I'm assuming you see it that way as well, but I might be missing a nuance.
No, I actually have a very interesting nuance that somebody brought up to me during our holidays. One of my relatives, a little bit smugly, was saying to me, well, I don't know if I should be investing in crypto. My S&P's up 15% this year. And it's outperforming crypto this year. And, after giving him a little bit of a side eye, we had a conversation about that.
You gave him the stink eye, Josh.
But, all kidding aside, it's a valid point.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons, crypto has not outperformed gold or the markets this year.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting dynamic that's going on here. Look, it doesn't change our overall view on our ecosystem and what's ahead of us. Yeah. But it is interesting to see that this year hasn't played out how we thought it would.
Josh, I'm assuming David gave a very elegant discourse to his family member about portfolio diversification.
I want to see an example of this side eye.
No, I've seen David's side eye. It's terrifying. You don't want to see it.
Like David, that girl, have you ever seen that thing on like Facebook Reels or something where the girl is like training or she's at a show with a pig and she's like glaring like this because the judges told her she couldn't lose eye contact? That's what I'm imagining. I'll just send you a clip of that.
Send me the link. I'm almost afraid to
will.
look at that too.
Let's say it's much scarier than the eyes that that people had as their icons on their Twitter post.
Oh, goodness. For everyone watching, thank you so much for being here. Clearly, David, Josh, and I are unloading. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had the chance to vent. If you've got questions or comments for us, please hit us up on the chat. We'll definitely address them. David, Josh, just continuing that thread. Josh, go ahead. I feel like you had to say something.
I mean, something that David said really made me think about something just in those moments while I was just thinking about that side eye as well. But really, the question of, like, yes, it is a fair point about if you're looking at it year over year, like as of the end of the year. But
Right.
is that real? Like, if we had gone back a few months and measured from that point in the year, you know, is there some, like, I guess what I'm just wondering is clearly there's the convention of measuring things at the end of the calendar year.
Yeah.
But is that really meaningful how they are at the end of the calendar year versus some other point, or is it just kind of arbitrary?
It's kind of arbitrary from the perspective of whoever is reporting or commenting on. It is very easy to say, David, I've had this conversation with friends and family members that are not crypto focused at all, and their comment is, the safest asset, Ron, outside of treasuries, gold is returning more than Bitcoin. And my response is, A, it's a broad market. Think about diversification. B, where were you last year? Where have you been in the past 10 years tracking some of these prices? So, Josh, to your point, I think it is very easy for pundits and cynics to say, look at that bad data. Crypto is down 5% year to date. Okay, that's a pretty myopic perspective on all of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just think the other thing is, look, it's a very convenient, baseline to use, and also ultimately statistics are, all about what data sets you put into them, and you can make things look however you want to if you play around with the data. But it is interesting, and I do think like we can reflect more on it at the end of the year, like when we think about things, like why has this happened, and what hasn't happened that we thought would happen.
Yeah.
I do think that's something good to reflect on. I also did talking about things to reflect on. Hearing the IMF come out and talk about stable coins wasn't on my bingo card for this month. So I was curious if either of you saw anything about that.
I saw it. I have not read through it in detail, so I don't have a synopsis, but that'll probably be weekend reading.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think so too. And I really want to dive into it because I'm curious to see what their view is about US dollar denominated stablecoins being the major ones being used versus European currencies, and how they feel about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, David, because I did see the news today, and Josh, I'm assuming you saw this as well. A MiCA-compliant consortium of banks in Europe is getting together to launch a EU-based stablecoin regime. And literally in response to, and I'm paraphrasing here, the dominance of stablecoin proliferation in the United States. So we're beginning to see the stage, David, get set for global banking organizations to really set up stablecoins as a method of payment, but B, as a method of differentiation. We can have really involved political economic conversations about dollar dominance, but I think that's a conversation that involves stablecoins in the long term.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's another topic ripe for further discussion too.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's a very dynamic topic, but I will add one more topic, and then we should, since I've been the one ripping up the script today, unless Josh, you want to weigh in. No, I did see that Russia's second largest bank is launching spot crypto trading and encouraging, their investors or their customers to get an allocation in crypto, which I thought was quite surprising. So, this has definitely been an international Friday.
It has been, David, and I already have a couple of colleagues, some of whom we know in the policy arena, who had 2 words for me: sanctions evasion. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. David, Josh, I've got to do it for everyone in the audience. David, you were missed last night. We had our WSBA holiday party. I just want to do a couple of shout outs. Shout outs to our friends at WSBA member firm Wachtell Lipton. Shout out to David Adlerstein, Kevin Schwartz, and the entire team there for a lovely, kind of an intimate gathering of, I think it was about 3 dozen, little more of people in the ecosystem, Josh. And David, I'll just share it with you. The belle of the ball, I'm saying it, Josh, I'm sorry, was as Josh Clayman showed up for the event, with so many people watching the Crypto Roundup, had not met her in person, finally got to meet her in person. It was quite a treat, David.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm sorry I missed that.
I don't even have a reaction for that because I most certainly was not the belle of the ball. But it was fun to meet people.
It was
and
fun to meet people.
Surprise people with how short I am.
The word we use is petite. Josh. But I think, Josh, the reason I bring up the holiday party last night, it was lawyers and it was bankers and accounting professionals and a couple of buy-side folks, believe it or not, were there. And it was really the scope, the breadth and depth of that thought leadership, Josh. And one of the conversations I had separately, and I got to drag David into this, and it was David, you're missed at any event of the WSBA.
100%.
But in this particular instance, I was racking my brain, hoping and wishing that David would walk through the door. It was, DATCOs are dead. The business model is over. Ron, discuss. And my first instinct is, it's a conversation I got to have with David. I almost called you on my cell phone, David. David, but when we, on a serious note, when we look at strategy and some of the things that we've seen there, when we've seen the fallout of what I'll broadly call low quality DATCOs that kind of, jumped on the bandwagon of becoming treasury companies, I don't subscribe to the idea that DATCOs are dead, but it is a tough time in that ecosystem. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I don't think they're dead either. And I still stick with my view that the DATCOs that are doing staking and running nodes and I think the more actively managed DATCOs are more likely to be successful than the ones that are just raising money and then immediately putting it to use and just, a one-trick pony kind of thing. Yeah. So I do think those that are actively managing, those that are, look, you can get some nice staking returns. And if you're getting staking returns and you're buying more of the underlying, it just creates a different dynamic than just statically owning, a token. The last thing is that we still have to remember that a lot of people can't access a number of these tokens. Yeah. So the fact that they exist does serve a purpose for some investors.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, go ahead.
I think we should just remember, startups fail. A lot of startups fail.
Really
Most
fair.
startups fail. Yep. And so I think to David's point, the strategy, not necessarily talking about strategy, the company, but the strategies of these various DATCOs, which, as we know, some were discussing taking interest in other DATCOs, right? As price movements occur, I guess it tests the models, right? But yeah. I think I don't personally think they're dead. I think right now we're having some. Ron, you seem surprised that I said that.
No. I don't think they're dead. I meant to imply that I agree with you. I don't.
Okay. I was trying to read what you were.
Yeah. No, I've only had 2 cups of coffee today, Josh. I'm sorry. No, I agree with you both. I don't think DATCOs as a concept are dead. What I think is dead or will be dead is crappy DATCOs that are getting crappy coins just because they think there's a quick buck to be made. I agree with you both on the model, and I'd love to hear some folks in the audience talk about this. But Josh, that does kind of segue us interestingly to strategy with a capital S, the company, because it really brings me to a point that we've been talking about, we haven't gotten to yet, David and Josh, which is strategy of the company struggling as its as MNAV kind of drops for that. And now the rumor, I don't know if it's a rumor mill, I think the MSCI index has a meeting and decision on January 15th about whether or not strategy does or doesn't make it into the index. And I think, David, that was a proxy for a lot of people in the industry to say, oh, well, if strategy drops out of that index, the bottom is going to come out of strategy, the price will drop, the .co model is dead. I don't know anything more than it's being reported in the news. But David, does strategy not join like an S&P 500?
I mean, look, I think it will join eventually. I think trying to pick exactly when's a little tougher. Look, I think there's been a very productive trade where people were longing Bitcoin and shorting strategy and shorting a lot of it. And so I think that trade's unwound. Look, crypto prices have gone down. The premium in strategy's gone down. I don't think it's like when you look at it like, in a big picture, I don't think it's totally surprising. So I'm not, I don't want to say fear mongering. I'm not as concerned about where strategy goes from here.
Yeah.
A lot of people may think we may have hit a bottom in strategy. So I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah. And I think the focus on strategy has been an excuse for a lot of people to kind of denigrate broadly the crypto ecosystem. I think we're in a better position now. David, Josh, I'd love your opinion on this. And David, I don't know if we talked about it recently. A lot of the leverage has been washed out.
Yeah.
I don't see massive leverage positions that are at risk, at least not right now. I mean, I haven't looked this morning. Josh, David, would you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Josh is, checking her derivatives up. Well,
How did you know? How did you know, David?
5x on BTC this morning. I guess so. I guess that makes sense.
Like for the record, everyone in the audience knows that when one of the three of us is looking away, we're looking at essentially like either our portfolio or a terminal,
or the dog,
or the dog. David, Josh, we've got a tight 10 minutes. We've got a lot of stuff going on. Josh, let's talk about it. We had some folks last night at the party, including shout out to Dina Ellis, who was, explains always a lot of the policy stuff that's going on. Josh, I think one of the other conversations we've had over the past several days is holidays are right around the corner. We're not getting a market structure bill this year. And I think I see things from the SEC and CFTC that are trying to accommodate the fact that we're not going to get market structure. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about the CFTC announcements? And what were your thoughts about some of that?
Well, so as many may have seen, the CFTC approved this week the first U.S. spot crypto trading. And that is something brand new. Many are saying that the CFTC may be gaining momentum. And some have even said in certain articles, is it gaining momentum over the SEC? I think to your point, Ron, like hopefully we'll have, and I think we do have a lot of cross-pollination and a lot of coordination. So I don't know if gaining momentum is the right way, but I think the approval of spot crypto trading on regulated futures exchanges for the first time is, that's a big one. There's been, about a decade of lobbying for that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when we hear the pundits say Josh, you and I have had this conversation in the past with others, is CFTC kind of jockeying for position? I mean, SEC and CFTC have clearly come out to be collaborative bodies from the perspective of the crypto ecosystem. And I think we're beginning to see the fruit of that. Yes.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But let me get back to the original question, and David, weigh in here as well. And it's not a wager, I promise you all, buddy. But market structure is not making it this year, given sort of the dysfunction in Congress. Does it make it early next year?
Look, I think if both the markups, I think Adam Goldberg did a great job of sort of giving us the timeline. So I'm just kind of like repeating his timeline with regards to, both bills coming out jointly from Ag and from the Banking Committee, for comments. And I think that if it can be dealt with in January, I still think there's a possibility. I'm definitely not writing it off. I know people are working really hard on it. So no, I never thought it was really going to happen this year, honestly. I think we had our, symposium in October. I was saying I thought it would be early next year, and I'm sort of sticking with that.
Yeah.
With that premise. So no bets here, but look, I think it's in everybody's interest that we get a good bill passed early next year.
Agreed. Shout out to Subjective Views on X. Looks like the date is January 26th, I guess, for passage of a bill. Subjective, if I'm missing that, we'll all cross our fingers as well. Go ahead, David.
Maybe that's prediction markets. We should check and see what the
Yeah.
prediction markets have to say.
Yes, as we both open Kalshi accounts later on today, David. David, Josh, we've only got a few minutes left. I think a couple of the other things I wanted to cover and certainly wanted to get your perspectives. David, we do spend a lot of time, you and I and Josh, looking at economic data. Josh, we joked about that last night, that people were surprised how much economic data you look at and comment on, which is amazing. David, CPE numbers, the big thing coming up is will there be an interest rate cut, at least a quarter point in the coming meeting? CPE numbers, the core PCE was 2.8%. I think it moderated a little bit. So it looks like inflation is cooling. It looks like job revisions, David, were towards the downside. So there's almost this growing consensus there's got to be an interest rate cut. But does that automatically mean risk on again for the market?
That's a great question, Ron.
It's great.
I mean, I do think that we're going to see the cut.
Yeah.
I will say this. The inflation, it's really hard to know where inflation is, like from our perspectives. Sometimes I'm like, wow, things start to feel expensive. Then I see all the airlines are discounting fares like the first week in December to buy until like January and February. And you saw a lot of the Black Friday sales, but they were sort of like November sales. They weren't really Black Friday. They were like 2 weeks before Black Friday. And even, I bought a gift for my daughter, and even the place I bought it for, this company Aloe, I'm still getting emails that their sale is still like, oh, he's still pushing it on for one more day. So it's really hard to tell because, again, I know it's for October, not November, but it feels like there are a lot of discounts being offered. So maybe inflation's a little lower via the companies are discounting more so than prices are lower.
Yeah.
I don't know what you two think, but that's just something that came to mind.
Yeah, I agree with you, Josh. Go ahead. I mean, when you do the high-end luxury buying, how have those prices been impacted?
So I would say I don't do much of the high-end buying, but of my regular end buying, I have seen a lot of sales. By the way, but let me let you go because I want to make sure I mention two things before, like in our when we're at the end. Or not at the end, but close to the end. So if you have a thought about what David was saying, please say.
I do. And real quickly, David, I'm seeing many of the same things that you are. I'm growing increasingly, and concerned's probably too strong a word, but concerned about the K-shaped recovery data specs, David, because I really think in the long term that needs to be resolved where the top, call it 10%, are continuing to spend. The bottom 10% are so much more price sensitive that I think that's part of the impetus for some of the sales that we're seeing. But David, real quickly, back to the idea about whether or not we'll get an interest rate cut. For a long time, the three of us have said it's not the data, David, it's the revisions. In the world we live in now, it's not the interest rate decision, it's the discussion about it. Is it dovish or is it hawkish? And we saw this with the last interest rate cut where I think it was split, where some of the FOMC decided that to say we shouldn't have a cut, we don't need it. And I think that commentary moves markets more than the actual interest rate cut itself. I'll shut up now, Josh.
No, I mean, look, I agree with you. I really am curious to see what the reaction is. And I think one thing we can all look for is if we get the basis to 25 basis cut, point basis cut, like how does the market react? Does it sell off because it's already priced in the news?
Yeah.
And that might be something interesting to see. And I also think it'll be interesting to see as people look into the data more, like where do they think inflation was falling? I think a big pain point for the administration is the view that day-to-day inflation, I'll call it, like day-to-day expenses for people are continuing to rise. I think that's something that they're going to try and address. And, I'm not sure exactly how they're going to go about it, but that's something I'm really mindful for. And I'll tie it to something that's been talked about a lot is that if we do see some kind of rebate check from the tariffs to come to certain people in the U.S. making under a certain amount, like while it's very helpful for them, I think that probably makes inflation worse because we printed money and things are now going to cost more. So it's just something I think to be mindful of. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, but it's my hope that inflation is lowering because I think that's good for everybody.
Yep, agreed, buddy. Josh?
So I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One, I think you guys may have seen there was a report by Congress this month. The United States House Committee on Financial Services put out a report on Operation Choke Point 2.0 called Biden's Debanking of Digital Assets, a final staff report. So for those who, I think at this point, everyone, not just in the digital asset space, obviously is aware that this kind of debanking was occurring and that there was, in fact, something, whether or not it was officially called Choke Point 2.0 or not, that this was the case. But I think the report is very interesting in going through, kind of regulator by regulator, some of the what is referred to, at least in this report, as being a coordinated attack, and then stifling innovation, and how the current administration reportedly is working to end that, with listing the same regulators. So I think, and they also indicate that additional efforts are needed to establish longstanding, here's that word, clarity in the digital asset ecosystem. But I do think having this, and it has many specific examples, naming specific custodians and others and other players. I think it's interesting, especially for the many probably watching this who lived through it, even though it supposedly wasn't happening. So that's one point. The other thing I would just mention is, my favorite topic, perhaps not, but the UCC and Article 12 in New York. It hasn't been adopted yet, but as you may know, this summer, the New York legislature approved it, and it was actually put forth at the beginning of this month to the governor for signature. So my understanding of what happens now is that, and this is, please fact check me, everyone, but this is what my understanding is that if a bill is submitted to the governor in New York before the 15th of December, if there's no action on it, it passes. Like you have to do an affirmative veto. And if it's submitted to the governor after December 15th, or maybe on December, I don't know exactly the on or after, before, that then if no action is taken, it's a pocket veto. So the fact that it was introduced at the beginning of this month means that if there is no action, no affirmative movement to veto it, it will be deemed passed. And I think that will be quite interesting for the finance markets, the lending markets, secured lending markets.
David, you know what Josh just did? She brought up another talking point for Monday's legal working group meeting on UC. I feel like we should have called Michelle Gitlitz and pulled her into the state conversation, Josh. But it's a really good point, and I'm not sure the I mean, David may know. I'm not sure the mechanics of a governor veto in New York State.
I'm wondering whether because the legislature passed it and they chose to do it at a time where the easiest thing, if nothing happens, if everyone's just quiet, it passes. So, but I guess we will see at the end of the month if nothing happens, we'll at least know what happened. But I think this could have big impacts for financing documentation.
No, fully agree, Josh. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. I think we do have a roundup after the 15th. I'll have to double check the calendar. David, Josh, we're a little bit over time. It's a tight session today. Lots of catching up to do this weekend. David, what's on the deck for you this weekend?
Well, I was going to say I'm going to be outside a lot, but
unbelievable this man.
Curses.
Unbelievable.
I'm actually going to be in Miami, going to go see Art Basel and enjoy some of the exhibits and some of the events tonight and tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that. And we'll be doing some reading and have like Josh, there's a lot of work that's been coming through. And so I think that is another bullish indicator how busy, a lot of the law firms are and other firms that are in our space. So I'll be doing some reading, seeing some art, and watching a little football.
Josh, did you notice how elegantly he talked about art? Because he's adding to his art investment portfolio some rarefied pieces at Art Basel.
Actually, I will mention that there's one piece that's worth Googling. It's by an artist named Beeple, and he actually put like faces of like some of our capitalists on these like walking devices, and they walk around. It's not the most flattering thing I've ever seen, but it got a lot of attention. So I encourage you to Google it. I'm not saying I'm in favor of the pieces, but it was attention grabbing.
You will be sending pictures, correct, David?
I will be sending pictures of the two of you. I didn't really know what to make of it. It was a surprise to me, but people were taken with it.
Interesting. Josh, once the heat gets restored?
So that was going to be my number one. Hopefully in the next hour or two, the heat will be back on. And other than that, I mean, I'm going to spend some time with my kids, obviously, but I've got a lot of work to do. So I have catching up to do. And also to David's point about, an uptick in work, there's also been a huge amount of interest now from banks in tokenized collateral and topics like that. So I'm actually giving a couple of different presentations on Monday, like different, like not like more than one presentation on Monday. So I think, yeah, that's a place to watch.
David, Josh, I am a couple of things. So for everyone watching, again, thank you so much for joining us on Monday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern, I believe it is. You can find it on the WSBA LinkedIn page. We have a webinar on all things crypto and IRS. We've got some real thought leaders, Jesselyn Dean, Nick Farrer, Raj Sololit, Daniel from AICPA, I forgot his last name, forgive me, talking about 1099 DA, talking about broker reporting regs. If you're not an accountant, make your accountant watch it. It's important as well. We've only got a few meetings left before the end of the year. And in addition to tracking all of the stuff the three of us text about all hours of day and night, I've got a paper to read on, wait for it, post-quantum cryptography that I'm supposed to read. Dear God, help me. But David, Josh, let's leave it there. For everyone else, again, thank you so much. If you have additional questions for Josh or David or I, email us info@wsba.co. Josh, get warm. David, hit the beach. And we will be back next week, everyone. Thank you so